Okay, we're back to the 2020 Virtually Everywhere Farm to School Conference. Thank you for all of those that joined us earlier this morning for our Louisiana Heritage in the Cafeteria session. We're about to get started with our Farm to School and the Food System session. And a reminder that after this one wraps up at noon, we are having a virtual taste test featuring a Harvest of the Month item, roasted broccoli. You can ask questions to our speakers using the Q&A function. We'll be able to see those during the session and we'll answer them at the end, as well as using the chat to communicate with each other. You can look through the conference program for every resource you need that is mentioned during this session, as well as email contact information to get in touch with speakers later in case your question doesn't have time to get answered at the end. With that being said, though, we are going to go ahead and start our session. Thank you all for joining us.
Good morning. Welcome to the Farm to School and the Food System session, the last session of the 2020 Louisiana Farm to School Conference. I am Carl Matzenbacher, Professor of Horticulture and Sustainable Agriculture at LSU, as well as the Executive Director of the Louisiana Farm to School Program. Today for this session, we'll be looking at Farm to School and how that relates to developing a more sustainable local food system. These past few months during the COVID-19 pandemic, this has demonstrated the weakness in our industrial food system and what are considered efficient food supply chains with production concentrated in other states and then shipped to distant markets coming into Louisiana into our grocery stores. Many consumers have indicated that they would prefer to source local and in season and also would like to know their local farmer and their farm families. There is also a heightened increase in growing your own food with a great demand for gardening knowledge and also inputs. And we have seen the scarcity of vegetable seeds this past spring as an example. So the question is, what is local? So this actually depends on the person or the organization asking. So I'm going to give some examples. So this could be the area around the city, the area around New Orleans, for instance, or perhaps around Baton Rouge. It could also be a bioregion or an ecoregion, such as the Acadiana region here in Louisiana. It could also be the borders of a nation or the borders of our state, as the example of the Louisiana Grown label that we see here from LDAF. The USDA often provides this 400 miles as the actual maximum distance, although most people would probably consider 50 to 100 miles to be what would be best to consider local. So why should we buy local food? What are some of the reasons that we should? And I think there are quite a few. To many of us, it is fresher, tastier, more nutritious. It hasn't been trucked across the country from California to Louisiana where I pick it up in the grocery store. Another aspect is it supports the local economy. It supports local farmers. It keeps more of your food dollar working in your hometown. So this definitely creates an economic impact. It creates jobs. It also conserves energy and reduces output of greenhouse gases. It's more environmentally friendly. It mitigates the environmental impacts of farming and the potential for climate change. And the one I like best up here is it gives you a better picture of how your food is produced. This is one that relates to food literacy and understanding where our food comes from and the importance of our food. So the real question is, how do we engage to develop a more sustainable, just, local food system? The food system is a cycle, as exemplified here. It involves many different stages. You can see at the top, production in green, as we go to processing and packaging, distribution and retail, access and nutrition, consumption, and waste. So developing a food systems approach looks at the entire cycle that our food travels from the site of growing, from production, to where it is consumed and finally discarded. And then to look at the links between the different stages. By doing this, we are able to affect change in order to produce a local, healthy, sustainable food system. And the outer ring signifies that a healthy food system is a balance between the economic factors, the social and cultural, as well as environmental demands on our natural resources, along with the political process. The balance of these demands is the key to sustainability. The first stage of a local food system, production. So the various aspects of that is the traditional, rural food production and perhaps more urban food production, edible landscaping, crop mapping, so mapping where food is grown, where it's and where it will be consumed. Agricultural land protection, so protecting good agricultural land from being developed into housing and other uses. Zoning bylaws to encourage production, agricultural production in particular. Official plan recommendations concerning local food systems. Hunting and fishing would also be considered part of this stage of production. Forest harvesting. Youth agricultural programs, youth gardening. So we had a summer experience program over 4 summers. That was Judy Myhan, myself, and Imam Sabri of the Islamic complex in Baton Rouge. A summer program. So Judy worked with the children, the youth, on learning how to cook, learning new nutrition. They grew food, they harvested product from the research station. They ran a farmer's market every week. They made their own hot sauce and sold their hot sauce. So they had, in addition to all of that, they had a leadership program. And then school gardens. So on the top right is a very old picture. This is actually from 1982 at one of my school gardens. This was my first school garden. This was in northeast Thailand. That we had growing food. The children loved to work out in the garden. The food was used to feed some of the children during lunchtime. And then in 2003, 2004, we implemented the Junior Master Gardener program in 3 schools in East Baton Rouge Parish. And then another example is Slow Food Baton Rouge is supporting a school garden program at the Dufrock School in Baton Rouge. And you see some happy faces out in the garden. So the second stage of a healthy food system is processing and packaging. So with that, we can think of community food centers and programs, supportive zoning and bylaws to encourage processing and processing facilities, safe food handling, and this is a really important aspect in terms of the Food Safety Modernization Act and health concerns, official planning recommendations, so having governmental agencies supporting processing and packaging facilities of fresh local food, and then advocacy for these facilities, abattoirs, and also the traditional washing, sorting, packing, storage of horticultural commodities. And a good example of food skills training is Judy Myhan at LSU, who has done a lot of training and work with a lot of different groups. She's created recipes. She's worked with community members and students on cooking skills, the culinary arts. And then there's the aspect of community kitchens. This is a really nice project on the left in East Tennessee, a community kitchen where they assist with recipes and food production, preparing, cooking, filling, labeling, flash freezing, cooking food for sale. And then I wanted everybody to know about the LSU Ag Center Food Incubator, that they have a wonderful facility too for people to use. The third stage of healthy food systems is distribution. So often there will be a community food assessment to look at where the food is grown, where it's delivered, how do people have access to it, and they conduct a community food assessment. Food hubs, community food centers are often part of a distribution network. Food banks, a good example. There are a number of food banks in Louisiana. The Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank has done a wonderful job, especially during COVID-19, of feeding people that are in need. So also mapping out, understanding where the food outlets are and where the people are that are interested in purchasing food, and then perhaps mapping food production and food outlets, the creation of food cooperatives, transportation to food destinations. This is a critical issue that even if you have a grocery store in a neighborhood, do you have easy access via transport to that? And then local food procurement policies. There's a lot of work being done around the country to establish local food procurement policies that relate to distribution. And then local food maps. The fourth stage is marketing and access. So in this, we could look and think about mobile vendors, food hubs, food cooperatives. Food literacy is part of this. Transportation to food, food charters and policy councils. Supportive zoning and bylaws for this, so to allow markets to be held in the city, for instance. Official plan recommendations, so the city or town actually developing plans and recommendations where markets should be and how people have easier access to good, wholesome food. Culinary and food tourism. And then farmers markets. I know a lot of you probably visit farmers markets. This is one of my favorite pastimes, is when I travel visiting markets. These are pictures of the Breadstick Farmers Market in Baton Rouge. So it's a meeting place. There's a lot of activity, and it's definitely a center of the community life here in Baton Rouge. And if you look at the statistics, you know, the number of farmers markets in the last 20 years has really blossomed. There's almost 9,000 farmers markets now in the United States in the year 2020. Other programs, a community supported agriculture or CSA program. We are seeing more and more of these. And I've been very encouraged seeing Top Box Foods. They are down in New Orleans. They're actually delivering now into Baton Rouge. So subscription boxes, paying in advance, a wonderful service that we're seeing. And the fifth stage of a healthy food system is consumption. So food skills, the culinary skills in cooking and preparation, poverty advocacy work, food policy action committees. A good example of that is the New Orleans Food Policy Advisory Committee in 2009 came up with a report, a very extensive report titled Building Healthy Communities, Expanding Access to Fresh Food Retail. Community food centers, nutrition and education, food forums and festivals, pick your own operations, going out to farms and picking on a farmer's, in a farmer's field, and municipal and school policy. So one of the aspects that I've been very pleased to be involved with is with Slow Food Baton Rouge and a collaboration of chefs and farmers. We've had farm to table dinners. We started in 2011, and it's a celebration of local food and then creating a connection and celebrating local food, the farmers and the chefs who utilize their food. And then just in general, farm to school programs, garden sessions, nutrition education, tastings. So on the right here, this is from 2003 at University Terrace as part of our program. The youth experiencing the lettuce and taste testing the lettuce that they grew in their garden. Another aspect of this stage would be local food guides. So this is an effort of the Louisiana Farm to School team, in particular Joe Hanna developed a website on the LDAF page, where to find farm fresh food during COVID-19. And the last stage is waste. So waste is actually a part of all of the different stages, but various aspects of this. So I don't know if everybody has heard the term gleaning, but gleaning, a good example is after a farmer has harvested several times in the field. There may be very good products still left, and so having people going out and gleaning product from the field. And also part of waste is waste management. So composting programs, either home, school, institution, or in cities. And then down below is the Lafayette Parish composting facility, and they allow residents to be able to pick up compost if you're a resident of the town. So what are some of the benefits of developing local food systems? We can look at the economic benefits. I mentioned economic development, but by substituting local for imported or food being brought in, we can increase local employment, increase income and investment in the rural and urban communities. In thinking about the environment, we can protect land, water, and other resources for future generations. And health, one of the interesting aspects is, gardening, hunting, gathering. That actually provides physical activity and improves our mental health, as well as providing access to healthy, nutritious food that we need. And then the social aspect, so food literacy rises with increased opportunities for learning and dialogue, and food really becomes a community connector, and everyone becomes aware of what it takes to feed a community. And then the resilience of a community. So resilient systems are adaptable, self-reliant, collaborative, as well as economically, environmentally, and demographically sustainable. So with that, I hope this quick review, actually a very quick look at sustainable local food systems, was enlightening for those working to affect change, all of you that are working in farm to school and in our local food system. We can see that a healthy food system is a complex cycle, and farm to school is an important component actually in every stage. There is great opportunity for every one of us to become engaged in your area of interest, in your particular interest within the different stages in a healthy food system. I know that all of you working in farm to school can see the importance of our work and efforts and how this relates directly to lasting change. I am looking forward to collaborating with everyone as we work together toward a more just, sustainable food system in Louisiana. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sunny Baker. I'm with the Mississippi Farm to School Network. And thank you so much to Sydney and the team for putting on this fabulous virtual event this year. Certainly an inspiration for virtual events in general. And though it feels a little weird to be talking to you ahead of time and recording this video, I'm really looking forward to the Q&A afterwards. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with y'all today. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background in food and my experience working with food systems. And you might be wondering why there's a box of mac and cheese up on your screen. And that's because this was my typical dinner growing up as a kid in suburban St. Louis. Both my parents worked full time, and my mom lovingly prepared this mac and cheese that she always added frozen veggies and tuna to make it, extra healthy for us. But this was just, a sign of the times that we were eating this fast food, this boxed food, this processed food, because our society had not and still has not really figured out what to do once mothers really entered the workforce in order to feed families delicious meals regularly that are full of fresh fruits and vegetables. Which of course many of us have figured out and made happen along the way. But in general, that the support is not there for families in order to do this. And that's what we're going to dive into today about food systems work. So even though this was my dinner growing up in college, I started really learning about food and food systems work. I would often reflect on my time in the garden that my grandfather grew when I was a child, eating the delicious award-winning tomatoes and corn that he would grow. And I started to get very curious and want to learn more about food and agriculture. And I even studied abroad in college in Madagascar, and I worked with vanilla farmers there. Just learning about, how this works, how our food system works, how food distribution works, how something that we all participate in, every consumer eats, what were the intricate details of all that. When I was graduating college, I thought, well, I will go into school food because improving school food has got to be one of the least controversial topics that there is. And for some reason, I was searching for something that wouldn't be controversial. And, I was very surprised. I did not realize how controversial it was going to be to get schools cooking from scratch and serving fresh fruits and vegetables. And I did that for a time in Boulder, Colorado, and I worked with Chef Ann Cooper and learned the ins and outs of school food. And then I moved to Mississippi in 2012 to start doing farm to school work here. And this is me in a carrot costume in 2012. So really, the real learning for me in food systems work came when I entered Mississippi, when I landed in Mississippi, which I do have to mention, was not like a something that I had planned on doing. It's because my partner entered grad school here, and I joined him, and we're happily married now with 2 children. So that was a good choice at the time. But I realized when I got here, we are just surrounded by this vast farmland. The number one export in Mississippi is agriculture here, and yet 90% of the food that we eat comes from outside of our state. So though we're surrounded by this agriculture and it's everywhere you drive and everywhere you go, we have such terrible health disparities and health problems in Mississippi, especially right in the Mississippi Delta, where most of this food is being produced. So I really started to dig in and investigate and learn about the food system and how the food system works. And this is when I was really exposed to this idea that the food system is not broken. The fact that we have people suffering and hunger and malnutrition, even amongst the overweight and obesity epidemic, that the food system is not broken. It's functioning exactly the way that it was designed to function. So you've just learned a lot about the food system and how the food system works from Carl. And now I'm going to go into a little bit about what that looks like on the ground, and then the role that we all play. So this is a breakdown of the spending for the USDA Farm Bill, which is the largest amount of funding that our government, federal government, invests in food and agriculture in the United States. So you'll see the biggest huge piece of this, I'm going to say pie because it's more rectangle shapes of this sheet pan, is nutrition spending. So that is the SNAP dollars, food stamps. And that's $664 billion. So it's a lot of money, and that's tied in. We're not really going to talk about that right now. What we're going to look at is this crop insurance and commodities section here over on the right. So that's $78 billion for crop insurance, $61 billion for commodities. This is basically a way that our government invests in farmers in our country. But when you look at those 2 piles of money, that funding is going towards large scale commodity agriculture, soy, cotton, corn. It's not really going toward what we think of as food initially, although the corn is frequently being turned into high fructose corn syrup or feed for cattle. Same with the soy. So this little tiny black dot in the lower right corner of this other budget is what goes towards small scale farmers. It goes towards farmers that have been socially disadvantaged in some way. It's in the form of these grant programs that are very hard to obtain and have access to. And I just thought this really does give that picture of where our values are in terms of the USDA's federal spending of money on food. So this system also encourages farmers to make the most on the land with little to no consideration for the earth or the environment. Though we have this conservation title, which we're also not going to really talk about right now, but this is, high yield farms. This is how can we grow the most on the smallest amount of land, and that is really harming our environment. Agriculture is one of the largest contributors to climate change, especially important to recognize in places like Louisiana. So our favoring of this large scale means that this money is going towards very few people on very large swaths of land. These commodity dollars and this crop insurance is going towards really large scale agriculture. So those are people that have had the access, the ability to farm large swaths of land and buy into this system of growing one crop and intensity of growing one crop. So who does that benefit? Who does this food system currently benefit? This system is very much of benefit to people with, like I said, access to land and access to money. To grow in this way, to grow these large commodity crops is not taking into consideration the health of our people, the type of diet that we need to survive and thrive, the type of diet that our children need to survive and thrive. So our current food system is certainly, I'm not even going to say benefiting our economy. I think it's benefiting the very few people that have access to those things, but it's not benefiting our health, the people, our children. It's not even benefiting our farmers, especially our small scale farmers and especially our farmers of color. And it is most certainly not benefiting school food and institutional food. So the pandemic has especially highlighted this problem in our country. And I encourage all of you to read the article that I listed in our resources from Mississippi Today. But what happened when the pandemic broke out was that we had this real realization of how much the food system was not benefiting the people. We had huge numbers of people out of work and relying on food banks and charities for food, which in reality, food banks and charities are a band-aid to the problem of people not being able to make money and generate income and find good living wage jobs in the first place. And then the food distribution system was all messed up. So normally our food is coming from around the world. Our fruits and vegetables are largely coming from California and Florida, but with some of those chains broken, with the closing of factories and people out of work and on, we really realized how much a regional food system, a local-based food system would benefit us, not just for an emergency situation like the pandemic, but for our everyday. That, as you all know, since you are in this and you've been a part of this and you heard Carl speak, that locally grown food is much more nutrient dense. It tastes so much better for you. And then that money that you're investing in those local farmers stays within your regional and local economy. So the pandemic has really highlighted this problem. I think there's many examples you can look to. A huge one is meat too. We really, meat was limited at grocery stores for a time because a lot of the factories were shutting down because of the virus. And it just, to me, you could look at it in a sad way. You could also look at it in a hopeful way, in that, okay, look, now we really see what we need to do to be resilient for the next time that this happens. And one of those things that helps build resiliency is to realize that individuals, me, you, we make up this food system. Changing our habits personally at home is going to be good. It's great to start, showing those examples and, gardening with your own kids and gardening with your school and changing the way that your school, restaurant, hospital, institution is purchasing and procuring food. But in reality, if we're wanting to change the food system, we need collective power. We need collective impact. So I'm sure you've seen, this is a picture of starlings. Maybe you've seen this across a field before, where they start to move. And I got this great example from the Vermont Farm to School Network, when they talk about their collective power and their collective impact. So starlings are very resilient birds because they rely on the group. So if an enemy comes close, they can immediately communicate with the whole rest and change the direction that they're flying. They also use this collective power to help find food and just take care of each other. There's safety in numbers. So for our food system for us to install a food system in America that benefits everyone, that benefits our children, our babies, our elders, the people that we care about the most in this world, our communities, we need to do this collectively. We need to do this together. So in Mississippi, we are doing this together via a number of different ways. But one of the biggest changes that's happened in Mississippi was the development of the Mississippi Food Justice Collaborative. So the Mississippi Food Justice Collaborative is made up of a number of different nonprofits in Mississippi that are both regionally based and statewide, that we're all starting to work together and talk together. I know, I'm sure many of you are familiar to this term of working in silos. And in Mississippi, there's a lot of, especially early on when I arrived in the state in 2012, there was a lot of, we're taking credit for this because this is something we invented and we want to do. And that is just not the way that this is all going to work and that this is going to change. But really giving up that taking of credit and ideas and on takes a lot of trust building. And that's what the Mississippi Food Justice Collaborative has done. We're also in this working together and learning about one another. Like this picture, for example, is on a shrimping boat owned by Vietnamese farmers on the coast of Mississippi outside of Biloxi, where we went out and shrimped and learned about how that works and the challenges that shrimpers are facing these days. That's trust building that needs to happen, and we can only move at the speed of trust. We can only expand and come up with new ideas and work together the more that we trust one another. And a lot of this is really modeling for our state and federal agencies how this can be done, how we can all work together to learn, identify our problems, and especially learn and identify the solutions to the problems that our own people face within Mississippi and our own communities face within Mississippi. And this is the same model we use for the Mississippi Farm to School Network. The Farm to School Network in Mississippi is made up of individuals, schools, organizations that we're all working together, all working collaboratively to address the largest problems that we face. And a lot of it is helping promote and build up great examples of how farm to school works in Mississippi, some of that like individual work and showing, what the future could look like. But a lot of it is challenging what are the systems that are holding us back from having a really robust farm to school program in Mississippi. What is holding us back from having the primary purchasing for our school districts be from local and regional farmers, from every kid learning in a school garden, and all of that. A huge part of this has been identifying and really writing down and coming together on our values, beliefs, and principles. So I would love for you all to check this out. This is a resource that I've listed for all of you, and you can find it at Mississippi Farm to School as well. But these beliefs, values, and principles, this was a long process that got us to this point. But really, if you pause for a minute and you think about why it is that you do this work, who you're serving and what you want to serve, this is something that you can return to again and again and again as the times change, as funding cycles change, as fads change. What is it that you want to do? Who is it that you serve, and how can you serve them best? And then how can you work together with your collective power, with the other groups in Louisiana, the other people, farmers, schools, teachers, parents in Louisiana, to have a better chance at reaching your goals in a really meaningful way. And I think a huge part of that is coming together on shared values. This is one of my favorite quotes from Fannie Lou Hamer, who is, our shiro here in Mississippi, especially with food work and food systems work. When you've got 400 quarts of greens and gumbo soup canned for the winter, nobody can push you around or tell you what to do or say. Something about Fannie Lou and the work that she's done in Mississippi, the person that she is and what she represents, reminds me so much of just this ability to for a community to rely on themselves, and that a community knows what's best for themselves. This was something that I have learned in Mississippi and has been now deeply ingrained in me and my work and what I do, is that, I might have had the privilege of growing up and had been able to go to a great college and learn these things and come back and develop leadership skills and on and on. But me going into a community and saying, this is what's needed here, and here's how we're going to do this and how this is going to work is not going to work. It's going to be a failure from the beginning, and it's not good for me, and it's not good for any of the communities that I work with. I feel incredibly privileged to have landed in Mississippi and to have learned often the hard way that I have a lot to learn, and that the communities that I work with in Mississippi, especially in the Mississippi Delta, especially with our Choctaw Nation in Mississippi, especially with our immigrant population, our new Americans, just that those communities are very aware of the problems that they face and are very aware of the solutions that will work best for them. And I just love this quote, and I love this idea, just to think of this resiliency that's already developed, and then the potential for the future. So to give an overview of what I mean and what I'm talking about, the food system is working exactly the way that it was designed. To dream up a new food system that benefits all people and our earth, we're going to need to work collectively and use collective action in order to provide great examples and change policies and break down the current system as it is. So you, as a food service staff, a teacher, a farmer, a parent, a child, as a consumer, you can model what you want to see happen in your food system. That's one small way that you can start to do this. You can grow your own. You can really touch base with like your own family's diet and community, your own yard, what grows there. Just start to invest in getting your hands in the soil and in your food, and visiting your farmers market to start to model what you want to see across your state. And then I would say, make sure you're joining together collectively. Stay active, use your collective power to educate our lawmakers to see, to make this so that our food system makes this very easy for people to make really delicious, healthy choices for their family, for small scale farmers, especially small scale farmers of color, to be able to start farms and thrive and live off of the land, to access land, to really dream up what could be. And these pictures come from Soulfire Farm in New York, and I hope this is another resource I've mentioned and is in the the notes. I hope you take some time to check out Soulfire and the incredible work that they're doing, especially for Black farmers in the United States. And I think it's just the most stellar example of part of that dreaming up of what could be. So I'll leave you with my little ones. These are my two little girls. And just like at the beginning of the slides, history is repeating itself, and these little girls are growing up in a household, in a family with two working full-time parents, myself and my husband. I'm learning even more now why it was that my mother was making Kraft macaroni and cheese for dinner. It's not easy. It is not easy to feed your family delicious, healthy, locally grown foods, especially when you are working full time and hustling to bring in income for your family. And, you know, for me, that is without having to take care of my parents or grandparents now, or extra family members or siblings, or, you know, this is what I've got right here are these two little ones that I have to feed. So I want to, in our dreaming up, I want us to think of a future of a time where this becomes the easy thing to do. It becomes the easy thing to do, to have the time, space, money, energy to do most of your shopping locally at the farmer's market, at grocery stores that are just, you know, the local delicious foods are just right in front of you, that your ways of purchasing this type of food are easy for you, and it becomes just the way that it should be. And this is really a food justice issue. I love this quote that comes out of a group of Aboriginal rights activists in Australia from the 1970s. This just really helps me connect to the movement, to the work. If you come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. So my liberation, the liberation of my family and my people, is bound up in the liberation of everyone else's. And we're going to have to work together to solve these huge problems that we face in food systems work, and work collaboratively and work together. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to speaking with you in real life here.
So back to real life then. We'll let our speakers back into the room here. All right. Along with our other panelists as well. Okay, Jahan.
Yeah, and we have one question in our Q&A. So anyone else listening who has any questions for these speakers, please put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll start with the one question that is in there now. We have someone from Rhode Island who's starting a collaborative there and wants to know whether our speakers have any major keys for starting a successful statewide collaborative. And either Sunny or Dr. Motz.
So Sunny, you want to take that one first?
Sure.
Morning. Hey.
Good morning. Hey y'all. Good to see you. Looks like some delicious satsumas on the table there. So great question, because I really do think this is an essential part to a food system that works for everyone, is grassroots power and collaboration from groups on the ground. So I'd say a lot of it is dependent on this specific situation, but certainly identifying the groups that are already doing this type of work and seeing what sort of collaboration is already happening is step one. And then if there's not a ton of collaboration happening, which is the case for a lot of states, especially regarding farm to school and food systems and food justice collaboration work, start to think about who has the capacity and the trust and the respect to lead a group like that. That was a huge barrier for us to get over in Mississippi and to break through, basically. So a lot of what we did was coming together around these shared values. We brought in a number of outside consultants, so this does take resources to do something like this. Even I'm not specifically saying like that you have to hire consultants, but like even if like you are attached to a university like LSU who has people with the capacity to do this type of coordinating and facilitating, basically coming together on shared values and then also coming together on shared strategic plan goals, I think it is the best way to sort of launch that type of collaborative work.
I would just like to add, I know in North Carolina, they started maybe 10 or 15 years ago, statewide, a lot of different organizations in all aspects of the food system. And they had universities, hospitals, so looking not just at food, but looking at health, economic aspect. And then they were encouraging local food councils that would feed into this statewide network.
We had another chat come in too that says, how do you introduce the idea of food justice to those who may not understand it and see it as something political? I'm gonna throw that one to you, Sunny. You have your food justice collaborative there, and we have food policy. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a really great question. And I sort of feel like in a way I have kind of modeled that in the presentation I gave today. Sydney asked me to talk about food systems work, and I have grown a lot. I feel like one thing that's important for all of us to do as individuals is to really invest in our own professional development in terms of equity work and racial justice, and especially food justice work. The Food Systems Leadership Network, which is actually the director of that program, is based out of New Orleans, Susan, out of the Wallace Center, is a great place to start. There are a ton of resources that Food Systems Leadership Network provides, and there's a great website on how to dig into all of that. But yeah, I think really investing in your own sort of like, just for me to say some of these things took a lot of learning and a lot of becoming comfortable in what is my power and what can I say and what should I avoid saying, and on and on. And then to further take that and help people understand and make it not come off as political, because in my mind it's not really political, it's a civil rights issue, is to back it up with research. Research and anecdotal evidence. I mean, you can very clearly see in the food system some of these equity discrepancies in our communities. Which communities are being invested in, which farmers are being invested in, what do they look like, who has access.
Sorry about that. I said we do have some other food system questions as well. As we're closing out our session, we only have about 6 minutes left. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no worries.
We do have a question for both you and Carl. Do you see a role of technology in facilitating local food systems? Like, for example, in your presentation, Dr. Motz, there was a map of local food producers during COVID. Is there value in some sort of way to find and buy local food online?
Yeah, so I think we have to rely on technology, and there's a lot of apps, there's maps, and even collecting data. And how do we collect data to know, and so that like they're doing this work with planning and looking at, let's say, low food access areas where the grocery stores are, and how many miles is it to get to the grocery store, and then you look to see, is there a bus route there? So that is all done using technology.
Yeah, especially since COVID too, the amount of technology that's gone up with accessing food because you can't do it in person so much. We do have an interactive activity for everybody right now that I'd like to share. We have something for you all to text and join us with. So if you would please text, oh sorry, let me move this to the side here. we're looking for what is one farm to school activity you're planning to do after this conference. And for you to submit your answers, please text, and I can't see that number actually on my screen.
Well, you got to click it off for, oh, there it is.
Louisiana F2S272 to number 37607. And let us know what's one farm to school activity you're planning to do after this conference. We're looking for answers like start a school garden, but keep it as short as you can, 1 to 2 words. School garden, local food, farmer's market, coloring sheet, harvest of the month, pumpkin carving I think would count as well. So based on the conference and everything that you've seen today and the past few days, last week, you know, what's one farm to school activity that you would like to actively do? We did have another question come in, but I just want to mention a few things while our answers come in. We have a farm to school challenge that I'd like to remind everybody about. And I think Crystal can speak on that a little bit more. Although I don't know if I got her camera.
You just moved in, so yeah, we will do it.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry about that.
Okay. So as you guys are submitting your farm to school activities that you would like to do after this conference, I would like to encourage you to, if this conference has spoken to you and you would like to do a farm to school activity, or you were already planning on doing that, I would like to encourage you to sign up for our Farm to School Challenge so that we always report these numbers to our legislators, so they know that we're out there doing farm to school work. So if you go in to our website on the homepage at www.lsuagcenter.com/Louisiana Farm to School, you can find the link to take the Farm to School Challenge, or we're going to post it in the chat here right now. So if you go in, you sign up for the Farm to School Challenge, you tell us how many students you plan on impacting, and maybe which activity you're going to be doing. So it could be the Great Louisiana Satsuma Peel. It could be, like she said, the school garden, or maybe you want to bring in a harvest of the month and feature a taste test for the month of October. This is all for the National Farm to School Month. And so we encourage you to do that. And in return for signing up for the challenge, you will receive lots of social media graphics. You will receive a press release and information on how you can conduct your activities, how you can get that local procurement into your classrooms. And so the challenge will not only help us talk to the legislators and tell them that we're doing farm to school, but it will also benefit you, and you can really reach out to parents and let them know that you all are doing some great farm to school activities and getting some local food into your school system. So I would encourage you all to do that.
Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate that. And as she said, the link to the Farm to School Challenge is in our chat. Before we answer our last question, I just want to make sure that we cover everything as we wrap up here at noon, the 4th day of our conference, 4th and final day. Just a huge thanks to our steering committee and all of our speakers for putting this together with us. It was a lot of work this year, pivoting from our 5th in-person conference to becoming our first virtual conference, and that was a really big learning curve for all of us. As well as our survey that is coming out. You will get an email about that tomorrow, surveying you on how you enjoyed the conference, anything you could suggest to us to change. That will be covered for all 4 days. And also you have a link to your program there. As we said, the program is full of resources for this session and all of the others. It also has contact information for all of the speakers and a list of our steering committee members in case you'd like to contact, well, not contact any of them, but look up who all helped us put this together. But let's take a look at our poll results here. It seems that the majority of people are going to be gardening, doing school garden after this. I'm seeing a lot of harvest of the month items in here with satsuma and broccoli. I Thank you. That looks great, getting those answers together. What was our wishes? Oh, yes. Also, all of these sessions have been recorded. So we'll be getting this together for you all, adding captions, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but some of the speakers had even more to talk about they didn't have time for. So we'll have some uncut, unedited presentations that go on for anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes that we could only use about 10 to 12 minutes of. So look forward to that, and you'll be getting an email as soon as those are available to you all. Anything else? Oh, wait, okay. We're not done for today though. We have a virtual taste test session after this.